Now it's time for another Board Game Brawl preview with Nick Minahan, sponsored by BoardGameBliss.com.
Hey now, my name is Nick, this is Board Game Brawl, and today we're going to be taking a look at a game that is currently seeking funding on Kickstarter. You only have about a week left when this video publishes, so you have to hurry and go over there. That game is called GOTY Game of the Year, the card game, and it's from Ash Tree Works. Now, if you like what you see throughout the rest of this paid preview video, I'm going to encourage you to go to the official Kickstarter project page. You can find out even more information than you could possibly find out in just this short video, and hopefully you'll consider backing the project. Now, Game of the Year is a game about actually designing a video game. You pick a game at the start of the game from a couple choices that you have, and then it has different assets that you need to acquire. All the things that, if you're making a real-life video game, you would need. Artwork, game design, music and sound, storytelling, all these different aspects that come together to make a modern top-tier AAA title. You need those things, but in order to get them, you need to actually have staff and developers and people and talented artists and creators who can actually do those things. And if you can get those, then you're going to get the necessary asset cards, mechanically speaking, to make the game possible. And the first person to actually do that is going to be the winner of the game. But of course, your opponents are not necessarily going to let you just get away with that before they can make their game a reality. And there's a lot of nasty cards you can use just to make sure that does not happen or to boost yourself up. Let me go ahead and give you a brief look at how the game is played with a prototype version of the game. So what you see here may change in the final version, just be aware of that. Then we're going to come back and I'll give you my final thoughts. Alright, I'm going to give you a very brief rundown of GOTY Game of the Year. This is a competitive game where players are competing as game developers to make their dream video game. I should mention, however, that if you want, you can actually play this game in multiple modes. You can play a solo mode. You can play a game where the game is competitive, but not quite as harsh as the main mode, where the development cards that are bad affect only you and you can't use them against the other players. Now, the goal of Game of the Year is to be the first to build your video game, to make it, complete it, and finish it. So, consequently, you're going to have a deck of game cards that you're going to shuffle up and deal one out to each player. Actually, you deal out two, and then get to choose one from the two that you deal out to each of them. So, we'll go ahead and zoom in on this a bit. So you see this is a sandbox video game. It'll have a brief description there, and then it will tell you the different game development milestones that you need to reach in order to complete this game, to have these different assets. So there's game design, there's storytelling, there's programming, there's artwork, there's 3D modeling and design, and then music and sound. You need to have all these things. It's essential to have all these different things in order to have a good game, and this is what you need, just the bare minimum in order to make that game. And so you see it's going to change depending on the game that it is. So for a sandbox game, it's going to be important to have good narrative elements and good programming because there's a lot of different things going on. But then you also have like a first-person shooter where it's very, very important to have good 3D modeling. And then you have a shoot 'em up where the actual design and artwork and sound and music are most important. And then, of course, my personal favorite, role-playing games, where, of course, you need story and music and sound more than anything. So you're going to have one of these. We'll go ahead and switch mine over to role-playing game. And then out on the table, you're going to have a few other decks of cards. The one over here are the job cards. Then you have asset cards. And then you have development cards. For now, you're just going to shuffle up the development cards and put them off to the side. But at the start of the game, at the start of the first round, and consequently at the start of every round, you're going to have 6 job cards and 6 asset cards. You'll randomly shuffle those 2 decks and then put those an allotment of 6 cards for each of those different types of cards out. Whenever a player takes one of the cards on their turn, they're going to immediately replace it from the deck. So everyone's going to have 6 cards to choose from for each of those. Now let's take a look at the asset cards first, because these are the most important part of the game. These are what you need in order to make your game card, to complete the mission and to win the game. They all come in the different colors and symbols corresponding to all the different elements of the game that I just went through. And you notice how there's different levels here and little stars indicating the level. So you need these asset cards to complete the game. So if, for instance, you needed to have a 3 in, let's say, artwork, this would be a fantastic card to have. But in order to claim one of these asset cards, you need a developer, one of the different job searchers that you hire. You need someone of a high enough level in order to take that asset card and use it. So let me go ahead and show you some of the job cards just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about here. So for instance, now each job card is keyed into a different development idea. So here we have game design. That's what the color and the symbol is in the top corner. And there's a level of a card. So she's going to help you get level 3 asset cards for design. Lynn Swish here, you have a little story blurb about her. Then what her protections are from some of the nasty development cards. We'll get to that in a moment. And then at the bottom is the cost of the card. Now we'll also explain this in a moment, but you only have 5 coins to buy, to use to purchase these job cards. So she's going to cost you 3, but she is a very good card as far as getting these high-level asset cards. Here you have Dana Rose, who only costs you 1. However, she is only a level 1 for game artwork, and she has no protections from nasty dev cards. Now here's an example of one of the golden job cards, and this is going to be very helpful because when you complete the development of one of the different aspects of the game, you would normally just turn your asset card sideways, which I'll explain in a moment. But it can still be vulnerable to enemy attacks. But when you have one of these people, it golden locks the card, which means it's going to be protected from nasty things. You won't have to lose that asset. And as you can see, they just go through all of these different types. They all have different protections and different costs and potential different levels to use to get the asset cards. Now let's talk about those dev cards. These are the cards that you're going to use to have influence on the game, both to help yourself and to hinder your opponents. You're not going to start off with any of these, but at the end of every turn, you're going to be able to draw one into your hand and potentially use it to a maximum of 3. So here we have Under Control, which this is one of several cards that will let you secure the assets of a job. So you can lock a card and protect it from, as long as you have all the necessary assets, you can protect it from your opponents. Same thing as having one of those golden job people. This one gives you an extra coin to hire for the round, up, up, and up. True Passion, this lets you avoid the discard of a level 1 worker. This one, Reformula, lets you refresh the asset pool. So if you don't like all of the assets cards that are out there, you can get rid of them and put out new ones. Same thing here for Supply and Demand, but this one is for the job pool. Back in Time, you can return assets from the discard pile. Armored blocks any negative effect, so it's kind of like a defense card. Problem Solve lets you pick an asset above the level you would normally have to. Bonzo Server, these are the attack cards that we're getting into. This one forces you to lose an asset if someone uses it against you. Dichotomy, you lose an art and a music asset, but there are several other different cards like this which affect either multiple assets or your choice of one or the other, and so on. The Garage Band here says that you can't hire next turn. Mean Rumors forces you to discard a level 1 job, which is why you might use that protection card I mentioned earlier. And Riot forces you to lose your next turn. And there's several other different types of cards. Sometimes there's multiple cards for the same type of effect, but with different artwork and names. But you get the idea. Okay, so let me just go into a little more detail about how the turns are going to work. When is your turn? You'll take turns in, you'll choose a starting player and then take turns in clockwise order. The first thing you can do on your turn is hire and or fire one of your employees. So you have 5 coins to spend unless you use a card like I showed you before that gives you an extra coin for the round. And let's say you can do both types of actions once. You don't have to, but you have the option of doing each of them once. So let's say I'm going to hire Zoe here, who costs 3 coins, and then I immediately replace her with a card from the deck. Now in a future round I might say, well, this just isn't working out for me, so I can discard this character to get 3 coins back, and then I could go ahead and take a different one if it is a new turn for me. Next up is picking an asset, and here's where I'm going to go into a little more detail about this. So there's a couple different things you need to worry about here. First and foremost, you can't take an asset card unless you have a job card of that particular type and of at least that level. So for instance, here we have Edmund Gregson, who has a level of 3 in music and sound, so he could easily take this level 1. So that's great. He's going to go ahead and do that. Now, these are not actually tied to the job card in particular. So if something happens to this job card, this actually would stay out here, and you can replace that with another job person at a later date. But another important thing here is that so let's say that if you only needed to have a level 1 in music and sound, which for our RPG game is not the case. But let's say that you did, that's fine. But if you needed to get to a higher level, you need to take them in order. So you need to take a level 1 music and sound card first, then get a level 2, then level 3. And of course, just like with the jobs, when you take a card, it's immediately replaced from the deck. And then remember how I was talking about locking the cards before, which probably sounded a little bit weird out of context. Basically what happens is if you get to a point where, okay, in this case, I have enough music and sound, you turn your card to where the gray sort of unlocked lock is pointing. This is just a sign to your opponents to say, hey, here's how far I've gotten. I've completed another one of my objectives. Now, if you had a golden job person, or if you played one of those special dev cards that let you lock a card permanently, you'd actually flip it to this side with the golden lock showing. So now it says, hey, I just completed this objective, and you can't do anything about it. The next step in the turn is the dev cards. If you have less than, first off, if you have dev cards from previous rounds, you can use them, but if you have less than 3 in your hand, you draw 1 card. You can't draw another card if you already have 3 in your hand. You're going to have to use 1 and then put it into a discard pile, and then draw a new one to replace it. After that, it's just the end of turn. You make sure that both of the marketplaces, so to speak, are stocked back up. And then if every player has already taken their turn, in other words, you've gotten to the end of the whole round, everything gets wiped away and reset. You get rid of all the job cards that are out there, all the asset cards, and replace them with brand new ones so that you keep the circulation going and get new blood out there on the table. And of course, as I mentioned before, the goal of the game is to be the first to get all the necessary assets to complete your game, and if you're the first person to do that, you win the game. That is a quick run through of GOTY Game of the Year. Now, let's get to my final thoughts. Well, right off the bat, I can say that Game of the Year covers a theme that honestly, I think I have seen a couple of other games do this, but not nearly enough. This is a theme that is just rich with potential for board game and tabletop game development because, first off, there's a lot of crossover between video gamers and board gamers and vice versa. I mean, intimately tied pop culture, nerd culture areas there. And because of that, everyone's got both types of groups have interest in each other's hobbies, and and they crisscross all the time. So it makes sense that tabletop gamers would want to play a game about developing a video game. It makes sense. It's neat. It's unique, and it's something that can really be done well. And in this particular case, you have a game that is very accessible to a lot of people because a lot of people who love video games, who want to get into tabletop gaming, maybe don't want to dive right into like this heavy 2-hour-long Euro or big epic Ameritrash game. They need something a little bit lighter, something that's easy to understand, fast to learn, and that is the case with Game of the Year. And it really, really helps that the artwork and graphic design of the game makes these gamers feel right at home, especially if the person in question is really into indie games, the type of games that you download from Steam and just have a lot of fun with, like roguelikes and things like that. That's the type of artwork that I'm seeing here. And by the way, I don't profess to be a huge expert in video games that were made after like the year 2000, but I do know a bit about it. I've totally been consumed by tabletop games, but I know that a lot of the people that come into my group are brand new to tabletop gaming, and when I bring out games that look like Game of the Year, they're like, wow, okay, that's really neat. I didn't know they made games about this type of thing. So this is definitely a useful game for those types of situations. And like I said, there is the crossover appeal here is going to be the fact that for people who are just into card games and tabletop gaming, there's a legit game here. There is strategy. There's this whole thing of trying to get the right cards, and you're essentially bidding for these different cards out on the table, making sure sometimes that you need to have the right ones out there, so you play dev cards to clear the row and to get new cards out, and then trying to get the right asset cards while using your dev cards at specific times that are most useful to you to either boost yourself up or hinder your opponents. So there's some pretty stiff hand management things going on in this game that you have to keep track of. So I think the game is going to be very accessible to a lot of people who are into the theme, which is a very accessible theme at this point. But because it's so easy to understand, that you can have it up and running in 5 minutes, the fact that there there is, despite that ease of play, a strategy in depth to it that is surprising. You're going to be able to keep longtime gamers into the game. So it's a good filler game. It's a good, just light game to throw around and to have fun with people who get into the theme. And for that reason, I think it's going to work with a lot of people. And it's also a very family-friendly game as well for younger gamers. Definitely something to take note on. And of course, it's got that pixel artwork. So if any of those things sound good to you, if you think you fall into one of those categories of people who would really enjoy this, or you know someone who definitely would in your family or friendship circle, definitely go to the Kickstarter page and check out Game of the Year. It's going to be on Kickstarter for about a week at the time this video publishes, so you don't have too much time. You got to go check it out. There's going to be a link down in the description section underneath this video, and also in the top corner of your screen there's going to be a little card that you can click on to pull down that will show you, that will take you to the Kickstarter page. Find out more information and hopefully consider backing Game of the Year GOTY from Ash Tree Works. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.
Thanks for watching. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. And make sure to check out our sponsor, Board Game Bliss, where you can find an amazing selection of games from around the world. BoardGameBliss.com. Thanks for your support.